You're going to be attacking each other. No physical contact. Everyone's allowed to have their own opinion, so it doesn't matter. You're not correcting them. You're not trying to change them to your ways. That's not how this is. If you can't think of anything to say as an attack, just say, that's stupid, or it's selfish. That'll get you going. Okay? So, if you are the negotiator,
it'll be their passion.
Well, I should have had two passions. Yeah. I didn't do that. Hope you have another passion. If not, make one up, but it's okay. Your passion in this one is not allowed to be your kids or your family or building churches in third world countries because it's really hard to attack those things. So just kind of keep it generic, pottery, I don't know, gardening. There you go. I knew. Oh, good, you're listening. So you're going to get attacked. Troy and Nick are going to demonstrate this for you. If you're the negotiator, you're the one with the passion that's getting attacked. Okay? If you are the so whoever was negotiator first, you're going to be negotiator first again. You're the one that's getting attacked. The purpose is for you to figure out what the motivation is behind that attack. It's hard for you to get angry when you're curious. And when you're curious about why this person hates gardening so much, that is what is going to help you figure out what their worldview is, where they're coming from. Why? Why do they dislike it so much? Okay, Troy and Nick.
All right, you want me to be the negotiator, or you want to be the negotiator?
You can be the negotiator.
Okay.
Nick wants
So
to attack.
ask me the question.
What are you passionate about?
I'm passionate about music.
What about music makes you passionate?
Oh, I love the fact that when, I'm singing and spending time listening to music, it's calming, it's relaxing.
Oh, you just want to make everything about you, don't you?
Sounds like you have a reason for saying that.
Yeah, you said music and you want to sing and you want everybody to look at you like, wow, Troy's got all of these skills and he's such a great singer. What a beautiful voice.
It seems like music is something that you're not really into.
No, it's just, why music? It's like, you could do so many other things with your time.
Other things?
Yeah, a million other things. You could help people instead of just self-serving with your music.
Oh, sounds like you're passionate about helping other people.
Well, yeah. Why don't you just not be selfish? And there's other people that need help. So instead of spending time with your music, go help them out.
Sounds like you like to go around and make sure that other people get something good out of their life.
Yeah, of course. Why wouldn't you?
It seems like growing up, you didn't get the things that maybe you really needed.
No, I got everything that I needed, and definitely not including music because it's so selfish.
Oh, okay, good. It sounds like I may be being selfish by just caring about music.
Yeah, pretty much. You want to be the star. You want to be up on stage in front of everybody.
It sounds like you've had people in your life that didn't want to hear what mattered to you. They were being selfish about themselves.
Maybe, but I care about others more than I care about myself.
Oh, sounds like other people are more important.
Yeah. Why do I just need to focus on myself? There's so many people on this earth that need help.
Well, sounds like you have a global vision.
I don't know about global, but, something beyond just myself or just the people close to me.
People close to you?
Yeah, why would you only want to help those people close to you when there's other people who don't have anybody close to them?
Sounds like you believe in the underdog, helping the underdog.
Nah, I don't think it's really an underdog thing. Maybe underprivileged.
Okay. Sounds like giving the underprivileged an opportunity to get a leg up is important to you.
Yeah, of course. Some people are dealt crap hands of cards, so they need help too.
It seems like doing something good for other people make you feel good.
No, that seems a little bit selfish, similar to music.
Okay. Well,
Okay, guys. Okay, so you get the picture. One thing I want you to try to avoid, if you say your passion is fishing, and then they say fishing is stupid and it's stinky and worms, gross, and you say, well, sounds like you've never gone fishing. Whoa. Did you just attack them? You just pretty much challenged their feelings about fishing in a kind of a way that made them feel stupid. That's not what you want to do. You want to get to the why behind why they don't like fishing. So what do you say? Oh, sounds like worms gross you out. And then you take them off. If you notice, Nick kept coming back and giving Troy a hard time, but
I had to snap out of it.
he likes the attack. When Troy kind of was getting more to the root of the issue, he calmed down. An attack is only going to last 35, 45 seconds. So if you can just hold your tongue and let them go for 30 or 45 seconds, they're going to run out of steam. And then you can kind of take a deep breath and then label them with something. It seems like this is something that really means a lot to you. And then let them explain. Okay? A true full-on attack, 35, 45 seconds. You can't keep energy up like that too much unless you're on something, but no one here is on something, right? So we don't have to worry about that. Okay. All right, so come up with a passion real quick and get back in your roles. Remember, the negotiator is the one with the passion this time. The talker is the one that hates it. Everybody clear on that because this is confusing. The negotiator has the passion and is getting attacked. When you are attacked, it sends everything sky high. Your blood pressure is going to go up, your heart rate's going to increase, and you're going to feel like your face is going to flush, especially if it's something that you're really passionate about. I mean, this is just an exercise. This is just an exercise where you know there's nothing going on. If you say something that's not exactly right, it's okay, and yet you're still. Of course, I will say a lot of that is probably because this is new and you feel awkward and you're like, I don't know what to say. How many of you thought about what we talked about earlier when you said why? Why do they hate hiking? You consciously thought that? Did that help? Yeah. Good. Think about a political conversation with someone who doesn't see things the way you do and how riled up people get because you don't agree with them. And I can tell you, everybody in this room has probably had some kind of conversation like that. Thanksgiving rings a bell. When someone attacks you like that, and not only are they attacking your passion, they are attacking you so passionately that it's hard to respond. So what is it doing to your brain? Scrambled eggs. So how do you stop that from happening? Breathe. Why? Why do they feel the way they feel? I don't want you to chew on this. This is just my own personal little thing, but we are so divided by politics in this country. Just imagine if everyone took the time, instead of saying you're wrong because you don't see it my way, if everyone took the time to just say, okay, you don't have the same view I do, it's okay, but you know what, I'm really gonna try and figure out where you're coming from. Get curious about why the other side feels that way. I promise you, don't go looking for the political conversations, because it can go badly. But if you have someone and you know that that's going to be an issue, instead of trying to conform them to what you want them to be, find out what they have to say about the other side. Be curious about why they feel the way they feel. You might learn something. You might be surprised. I have a friend. She lives in LA. She's actually a producer in LA, and we wrote a book together. And the first conversation that we had, she started talking about different things, and I was like, oh, this is awkward. This is weird because we're completely opposite. Completely opposite. She's a liberal, lesbian, left, and I am a heterosexual, conservative, right. But you know what we found out? Neither one of us were over here. We're both here. We're both in the middle. We both feel the same way about a lot of things. And we only found that out because we were willing to listen to each other and have that conversation where we stayed curious. And I can promise you, no matter what side you're on, it's much easier if you just let the other person have their opinion and try to understand where it's coming from instead of having an argument, because it's not going to get you anywhere. When they attack and you attack back, scrambled eggs. Not even the good kind with cheese on them, just bad, okay? So please, remember that in the future when you're getting attacked. It's coming from somewhere, you just have to figure out where it's coming from. Okay, any questions about that? Yes?
So in a conversation like this you're having with some friend or client or whatever, in this exercise we're allowed to ask questions about these statements. Is that how you would approach this in the real world?
I would. He's saying if you're in real life and you're having this argument, this conversation with somebody, would you ask questions or would you keep it the way you have it here? I would keep it the way you have it here. Because sometimes, if someone doesn't see the way you do and you start asking them questions, if you're not asking the questions the right way, they're going to take it as a threat, they're going to take it as a challenge, they're going to take it as an insult. So it's better for you when being attacked if you just stick with labels and mirrors. Because it's harder for them to take offense to that. One of the reasons is, just like Barbara said earlier, every personality type is okay with labels, mirrors, dynamic silence. So if you're in something with somebody that's going like that, you're better off with that than asking questions. Because if you happen to have an analyst and you're asking questions, it's going to be double whammy.
Sandy, can I add something to that real quick?
Absolutely.
And not even attack related, but just from an information gathering standpoint, when myself and my sales team do this, our information gathering is 90% labels and mirrors. We honestly ask very few questions until it comes to implementation and logistics, which is a completely different side of the coin. You can ask any question as a label. If you say, what do you mean by that? Seems like you have a reason for saying that. Or, what does your team really value out of our service? Seems like you have a reason for coming to us about this service. So labels and mirrors will get you all of the information you need, and then we'll start to add questions in later. But just think about that.
My question is about negotiating with an assertive personality, and I'm an accommodator, and he has anchored high in this business negotiation, and hopefully so he's got something I want. Just trying to figure out how we could best work him down a little bit.
All right, so there's a couple of things there. First of all, you identify this person as an assertive. Of the three personality types, I should say all three of the personality types have something as important to them as making the deal. And what do you think that is for the assertive? Let me back up. Let me give it to you. Let me tell you what the accommodator likes more than the deal. Let me tell you what the analyst likes more than the deal, and then I'll throw it out to you, Steve, as a question, what you think the assertive. For the accommodator, what is as important to them as making the deal is maintaining the relationship, particularly maintaining the relationship in the moment. That's most important to them. You can get into a room with an accommodator and you guys can come up with absolutely no resolution to what you're talking about, but the accommodator will feel good as long as the relationship is still there. The analyst, what's as important to an analyst than making the deal is data and information. As an analyst, if I go into a negotiation, I don't care. I mean, I do care, but if the deal falls through, I'm okay with it as long as I've been made smarter in the process, because I'm all about getting more data. I want to confirm the data that I went into the negotiation with, and I want to come out with a little bit more than what I came in with. And if those two things are checked yes, I'm in a good spot. So Steve, what do you think is as important to the assertive as making the deal?
I think in this situation, it's his ego, and I think he wants to be perceived as he is making the best deal for him.
You cut off a little bit there. I'm assuming that you said E as in ego.
Ego, yes.
All right. That's the bottom line. They want to be heard and they want to be respected. And that's fueled by their ego. The deal can go to hell in a handbasket as long as you know when you leave that room that they are the man or that they are the woman. And if that has been satisfied for them, they don't really get wound up around the axle as to whether or not the deal goes through. And so understanding what's important to them, to be heard and respected. People often think of the assertive as being the most difficult of the three to deal with. The reality is they're not, because all you got to do is shut your mouth and let them drive the bus, and they will tell you exactly what you need to know to move them in the direction that you need to move them in. Now, as for the high anchors, that's a hack. That's a go-to move for everybody because they've read previous books prior to Never Split the Difference coming out, and many of those books espousing anchoring high. When they know for a fact that everybody else on the other side, everybody else who's receiving that high anchor, knows that nobody anchors where they intend on ending up. And so I'm coaching you, Steve. I'm telling you, I'm going to make him or her defend that high anchor. Something to the effect of, it sounds like you took that number under a lot of deliberation before you landed on it. Would you be against walking me through how you came up with it? That's going to tell you right away, are they posturing, or is this anchor more solid than what you thought it would be? Make them defend it. Let's figure out where that's coming from.
In this situation, he has told me that he doesn't want to give away the goose that lays the golden egg. Why would I want to do that? Is what he's told me in our previous conversation.
All right. And so that goes back to what we talked about earlier. Don't get caught up in what he said. Where is that coming from? When somebody tells you, I don't want to give away the goose that lays the golden egg, what is he really telling you?
That he's got a business that has a lot of cash flow, and why would he want to give it away for a cheap price?
It goes deeper than that, Steve. It goes deep. It's more primal than that. It's more animal than that. You're staying on the surface right now. He's telling you something else when he says, I don't want to give away the goose that lays the golden egg.
Okay.
Why would anybody say that to you?
I don't know.
I bet you do, and I'm going to help walk you through it a little bit. I don't want to give away the goose that lays the golden egg. Translation: I'm afraid that you're going to take advantage of me on price. I'm afraid that you are going to take advantage of the value that I believe this product or service holds. I'm afraid of what this is going to make me look like internally if I am asking for $150 and we settle on $100. What kind of reflection is that going to be of me with my peers internally, with my boss internally? He's telling you, dude, I am under a lot of pressure to make sure that I don't get taken advantage of on this deal. That's what I don't want to lay. I don't want to give away the goose that lays the golden egg is screaming.
So it's kind of going back to ego again?
Going back to ego. Sounds like you're under a lot of pressure on your side to come in at a specific margin. Sounds like they're kicking you in the teeth on your side of the table to make sure that you're not taken advantage of.
Yep.
It sounds like you've been burned in the past. That's what it is. It's a fear of something that has to do with his ability to save face. He's either been burned in the past, they're clubbing him about the head and shoulders over this deal, telling him, you better not give it away. And that's what he's afraid of. That is the area of the conversation where you need to focus in on. Stop worrying about the actual words that he's using, and let's figure out what is that latent dynamic. Now, I threw that out for you, Steve. I'll bet you that what I said to you made sense, and it only made sense to you because internally you knew that was going on. You knew that's what that statement meant. You just probably couldn't articulate it because you're still doing this at a surface level. Most of you are still doing this at a surface level. I want to get you off of the surface.
Well, part of that is because I'm a slow guy from South Dakota, so I'm really just slow.
Yeah, well, you said that, I didn't. But what I will tell you, Steve, is that what you have going for you is you're a human being. And you have the same human nature responses as everybody else. Fear drives you to do certain things. Fear is driving your assertive counterpart into doing and saying certain things. And we collectively as people get so shook up by the fact that somebody says, you take this out of the contract or we're not going to sign. And then we start to freak out and we go back to our people and we say, we got to do something or they're going to walk. When the reality is, you need
way to work
figure out where
around
that's
that
coming from.
be, rather than take away or we're not going to sign, if he added in more things and we'll sign.
It's the same thing. It's the same thing. If they want something added, what are they telling you? You, Steve, are getting all freaked out that he wants to add certain things to it. What does that really say? That he's afraid he's not getting enough, that he's not seeing the value of what's already on the table, and he wants you to sweeten the pot. So let's go after that fear of not being provided the value to find out what's generating that, what's causing that. Pushbacks, objections, changes to agreements are all cloaks for fear of something. And that's what we need to focus on, not what they're actually asking, saying, or doing.
Yep. Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, it's an ego thing. I think it's a save face thing. And that does make sense to me now.
Excellent.
Thank you.
We never use an assertive tone of voice. It activates the amygdala in your counterpart, the fight or flight. So as soon as you start yelling at somebody, the logical part of their brain turns off and they're just kind of in fight or flight mode. So for the assertive, they immediately have to understand that, all right, they've got to stay curious. They've got to just be really observant of their tone. It's got to be something that they're thinking of before going into conversations so that they don't come off too harsh. It's not, it's not a problem to be assertive, but it's a problem to use that assertive tone of voice. So they just have to be super hyper aware and just know they've got to throw a little bit of smile in there. Make sure it doesn't come off too snarky or sarcastic. For the accommodator, while they do have the easiest time with the friendly tone of voice, what I've found with different accommodators is they have that friendly voice so much that even when it's time to drop into the analyst tone, they stay smiling. And if I deliver bad news to you in like a smiling, friendly voice, you're going to be like, is this guy a sociopath? They've got to make sure that they do practice that low and slow. Accommodators are always smiling, so they just need to not smile as much when they go into the analyst voice, because sometimes it's hard for people to get a deeper voice. So if you need to deepen your voice for the FM DJ voice, kind of drop your chin and round your shoulders forward. And what often happens is that'll lower your larynx. For singers, the guys with the deep voice do this all the time, but that'll come off a little bit lower. And then if you need to raise the pitch of your voice, you simply sit up tall, kind of chin up, and you throw that smile in there and your larynx raises, which gives a little bit of a higher pitch. And then lastly, I kind of touched on this with the analyst. They just have to be super focused on smiling more, to be more engaged. Staying curious, I think, helps all three personality types maintain a solid tone. But for the analyst, they just can't be putting people to sleep. Like I sometimes have a tendency to, if I get too monotone. Tone's a skill like any of our other skills. It's part of the negotiation 9 skills. And in fact, without tone, the other negotiation 9 skills don't work. So you still got to practice tone in low stakes conversations, whether you're at, grocery store, Chipotle, Starbucks, those are always the easy ones that I use. Retail store, whatever it is, make sure, you're practicing that. Even if you practice in the mirror so you can see your facial expressions, because a lot of times facial expressions will also work together with tone. Tone and facial expressions and body language kind of work together. So, if you find yourself making people kind of nod off and you notice that your body language is kind of like rounded and closed off, well, maybe if you stand up a little bit taller, pick your chin up a little bit, you'll have a little bit better tone of voice. So low stakes practice in the mirror. Like for salespeople, call reviews are so important. You might think you've got a great tone of voice. You run the tape back on your call review and you're like, whoa, like my tone of voice wasn't as good as I thought. Recording phone calls, like whatever it is, if you continue to practice it, you can drastically change your tone over time. If you don't have a good tone, none of these skills are going to land well. You could be the best labeler in the world. You could ask the best question in the world, but without the right tone, it's not going to land and you're probably not going to get the answer you're expecting to. So I would probably put listening and tone equally as important as each other. It's not too complex, but it's not always easy.
What happens if you are in a conversation and you use the wrong tone? How do you correct?
Number one, apology. Too many people are nervous to apologize nowadays. They think it makes them look weak, but it just makes you look self-aware. Like, all right, I was clearly out of line with the way that I use my tone of voice here. So an apology, probably even throw some accusations audits in there to be like, hey, I'm sure what I just said makes you never want to do business with me again. I'm sure what I said completely caught you off guard and now you're on the defense. We'll be mindful not to use that tone of voice again. So an apology, accusations audit, and then just, put your best foot forward and show that you're not going to continue to raise your voice. It's got to be like a genuine apology. I think that's what most people fail to realize. And hey, your tone of voice is going to come in handy with an apology. Like if I just said to you, I'm sorry, okay? You'd be like, are you really sorry?
Remember, you don't get in life what's fair, you get what you negotiate. If you want to become a better negotiator, click the link in the description below.
You're normal within parameters. But for example, there are three different, we believe that globally there are three different types of negotiators, how people approach conflict. Thomas Kilmann conflict mode instruments, some stuff I learned from Harvard. And it boils down to fight, flight, make friends. And these are the cavemen that survived. Either you fought, you ran, or you created an ally. fight, flight, make friends. And we have reason to believe that the world breaks up pretty evenly into thirds. So the first premise, I am normal. Well, no, you're not. Because if the world breaks up evenly into thirds, and we've globally tested, and literally globally, easily 25,000 people, and seen the world breaking pretty evenly into thirds. Well, if that's true, then you're one of those types. You're in a minority. 2 out of 3 people are not you.
Right.
So the first premise, I am normal, has got some flaws in it. And so then it starts to get worse when you say treat people the way you want to be treated. Like, I'm a natural born assertive, and I think of myself as direct and honest. What does that mean? If I'm direct and honest, you feel like talking with me in my natural assertive style is like getting hit in the face with a brick. Donald Trump is the great poster child of the assertive negotiator. Kicks chairs across the room, yells at people. In the short term, gets things done. In the long term, destroys relationships. So you asked me about cognitive bias. Like, I'm biased to my type, thinking I'm normal. I begin to misinterpret people. I begin to think that the way I interpret the world is normal. And then when somebody interprets it differently than me, if I'm normal, well, you by definition have got to be abnormal.
Right.
And so we start to get off track with this. And, and my Harvard brothers and sisters, that was one of the things that really sort of drilled into our head, was understanding your biases to begin with, and then just accept that they are biases. And a real trigger to empathy, why it works globally, is working real hard to see it from the other person's perspective. And as soon as your shift is into their perspective, then it doesn't matter if they're Asian or African or Latino, because you're working to see it from their perspective, and it immediately begins to pull you out of your own cognitive biases.
How about the framing effect? What does that mean?
Well, there's monetary framing, there's emotional framing, there's a number of different ways. Most people think of framing, and I'm going to start out with, and I'm not sure if this is what you're asking me about, but monetary framing.
Okay.
And that's like high anchoring.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm trying to frame the zone of possible agreement. One of my Harvard brothers and sisters, there's a couple of concepts that we disagree with strongly as being useful, and a lot that we like. Zone of possible agreement. We're gonna frame the possibility of where we could make a deal. And a lot of people say, well, let me frame the zone, but I'm gonna ask for a lot. I'm gonna ask for a lot of money. I'm gonna put a really high price on the table. I'm gonna high anchor. And there's data out there that indicates that this is a good practice. And they're a minority,
right?
But there are some successful negotiators that high anchor all the time. The problem with framing it monetarily like that is you drive deals from the table.
Right.
So you got to be careful. And I hate not making a deal I should have made. I mean, that drives me crazy. And a high anchor will do that. I could have made a deal on terms that were more valuable to me, but I scared you away by coming in with a financial asset that was just out of line. And you think, yeah, this dude's crazy, and I'm not dealing with him anymore. What we do instead, we do emotional anchoring. If I'm concerned, then I should be, that my price is high, I'm going to say, look, my price is high. I'm going to charge you a lot of money. Our former head of business development, she had a great story. A client who did business with us was shocked that he did.
Mm-hmm.
When he inquired about what our price was, she said, we are very, 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 very expensive.
Okay.
And he has a clear recollection in that moment. He was an experienced, successful salesperson who was dubious as to whether or not we could teach him anyway. He said to himself, I would never say that.
Mm-hmm.
And then he went on to describe the experience by saying, and 2 days later, we had a deal at that price.
Okay.
So, what we do is, if you're worth your money and if you over deliver, And the Black Swan Group over delivers. I had a conversation with one of our clients the other day that said, oh, our negotiation training made him $800,000 over the past year. Now, we didn't charge him 10% of that. We charged him a lot of money for the time that we coached him. Believe me, we charged him a lot of money, but we did $800,000. So we are expensive relative to our competitors. I don't need my price getting in the way of your thinking.
Right.
So, and we're going to over deliver, and we're going to be worth more than you will ever pay us. So you got to get price out of the way. And so we put a framing effect on emotional reactions. And then because we collaborate and we want you to succeed, and these are the caveats of core values, then we're going to be worth every dime.
Isn't it just framing? Also, it's how you're presenting an idea to somebody, because the same way you present it to one person may not be the same way you present it to somebody else. Correct? I mean,
well, and then that kind of becomes a definition of empathy.
Yeah.
Because if you want to frame everything the same way, then what you're doing is you're being a little tyrannical.
Right.
You want your way to work with all of them. That's where cross-cultural negotiations get into trouble. Americans go like, cross-cultural negotiations, what do I got to do when I'm in the Middle East? I got to make sure that I don't show them the bottoms of my feet, and then I only shake with my right hand and I sip tea with them. Well, you're looking for the little things that you can do to make it look like you understand it, but you still want to be yourself, whatever that self is.
Right.
So as soon as you start focusing on the other person's perspective and demonstrating an understanding of them, then there is some adjustment, not just for culture, but for people. Understand human nature, and then understand the human in front of you. Every one of us was born a blank slate. You take any child anywhere, born in China, born in Africa, born in Latin America, they're going to be a product of their geographical surrounding. You take an Asian, you grow them up in the South Bronx in New York City, you got the same character, no matter what the person's ethnicity is.
Yeah.
So we're all born a blank slate. We got the same basic wiring, and there's evidence of it everywhere. Like Facebook succeeds in every country on earth because everybody wants dopamine.
Right.
Everybody gets delighted the same way. Everybody reacts the same way. The social media, the only countries that social media is not a force in are those that ban it.
Right.
So that tells you that we're all wired the same way. So if if that's your starting point, now you begin to adjust to the person in front of you, then your pitch is going to change because you're going to tailor it to who they are.
So my takeaway so far is, as we're entering into any negotiation, let's all admit and accept the fact that we have cognitive bias. So we have to be aware of that. And then depending on who you're negotiating with and talking to, you've got to have empathy for that person. You have to frame your conversation and your questions in such a way that will connect with them. And we have to know who we're talking to. And
let me add a step in there too.
Please.
Because a lot of people say empathy is understanding where the other person is coming from. That's essential and inadequate.
Okay.
You have to demonstrate the understanding. And then maybe you start talking about making your pitch. There's an intermediate step that a lot of people miss. They're like, all right, so I understand where you're coming from. You feel this, this, and this, but they don't say that out loud. So therefore, I'll tailor my approach to what my understanding is. Now, the critical intervening step is making sure that you got the understanding right. And so my friend Stephen Kotler, brilliant dude, I recommend his training, The Rise of Superman and Stealing Fire, phenomenal books. Everybody should read. Stephen says, empathy is about the transmission of information. Sympathy and compassion are the reaction to the transmission.
Interesting.
So when you have empathy, you got to demonstrate it.
Okay, fair enough. You talk about there are 3 types of active listening, and there are techniques that you can use. You talk about mirroring and silences and what you refer to as the late night FM DJ voice.
The late night FM DJ voice.
Elaborate on what you mean by that and the other, and also mirroring and silence as well, because active listening seems to be a critical thing you need to do when you're having a conversation or negotiating with anyone.
Yeah, and it's proactive listening, and it's informed listening. What are we proactive about? What are we informed about? Understand human wiring that we talked about before. Like whichever type we are, we're in survival mode, which is the default mode of thinking.
Mm-hmm.
We're negative. You're pessimistic. Like, I got to worry about this outcome. You're going to predict 15 of the 3 possible disasters. Like economists. Economists have accurately predicted 15 out of the last 3 actual recessions. They're always saying it's the guy's fault. But that's human nature.
Sure.
So you're proactively, I got to understand that you're probably in survival mode. Success mode is highly positive, but we don't wake up in success mode. We got to override the system to stay in success mode. You do gratitude exercises, you meditate, you work out, you do all the self-maintenance things that people tell us that contribute to our success. Why do we do these? Because survival mode is negative. Okay. So knowing that, number one, I know that in advance. Number 2, I know the best way to deactivate that is to simply call it out, not deny it, but to call it out. Now, these are the tools that you were talking about a few minutes ago for proactive. Am I labeling? Am I mirroring? Am I using dynamic silence? Am I giving you a chance to think? I'm using these because I'm informed in advance that you're probably in survival mode, and that fear of loss is the single biggest impact on your decision-making, followed closely by identity, followed by your vision of the future. Vision drives the decision. If I got these guidelines to begin with and I'm listening to you, I'm going to be very proactive as to teasing these out. And then I'm going to be proactive with the use of the skills to either deactivate or nurture the emotions that are going to influence how you make decisions. Vision drives decision, emotion drives vision. You begin to see the linkage in how this works. So I'm going to use the hostage negotiation skills, because hostage negotiation just works because you're a human being. And then I'm going to say, it seems like something's on your mind.
Mm-hmm.
When we're talking, and like, for example, right now, you're listening intently.
Yep.
And you're giving me physical feedback that you're listening intently, but you're not just listening, you're processing.
Yep.
And if I say to you, what's on your mind? These are 2, I'm going to put you in 2 vastly different parts of your brain versus it seems like something's on your mind. When I say what's on your mind, you're going to stop and think. That's a stop you in your tracks question. Danny Kahneman would call, I've just put you in slow thinking mode. Deep contemplation.
Okay.
And 2 parts to that. Number 1, I put you in that slow thinking mode, contemplative mode, and you may or may not answer. But if you do answer, it will be after serious consideration of the answer.
Okay.
Now, sometimes that's a great thing to do. But if I don't want you to think about the answer, I just want the answer. I don't want to stop you in your tracks. I want you to just give me a basically straight, unvarnished download. I'll say, it seems like something's on your mind, and you're much more likely to just start giving me a stream of consciousness, unvarnished. You're not being deliberately deceiving before, just being contemplating is going to hold back some information. So I know that those 2 things trigger you to be in different parts of your head, depending upon where we are in the conversation, so we can advance together. I will pick one over the other.
So if you didn't hear in the back, he had talked about you. All right, you told us about the 3 personalities. You talked about an assertive that you should stay away from, that you should try to stay in the accommodator voice, and that about 20% of the time that you're in the analyst voice. But what about them? What if they're displaying that? That's your question, correct? I will tell you that if they're an assertive, we don't try to meet them with the assertive. In fact, one of the things that we teach the very new kids for domestic type situations. Click back 2 screens. We tell them to go in with this, low and slow. Lower your voice, intentionally lower your voice, because typically, I can't tell you it's going to work 100% of the time, but typically when you get somebody and they're so yelling, they're in your face, we just bring it naturally down and even lower our voice even more, most people will become curious. And they'll tend to mirror that same type of thing. When you're dealing with somebody who's an accommodator, very easy for us to have that back and forth conversation. People who are more analytical, how do we want to meet them? Use your accommodator voice. There will be that time that we're going to want to slow it down and emphasize certain points. I don't know if you see the value then in our product. We're slowing it down and we're emphasizing that. And then what do? We'll use the skills that we talk about of dynamic silence. And we go quiet. Why? The illusion of control for the other side. It keeps them talking. Because remember, it's not about us. It's about them. And the more that they talk, odds are they're going to reveal things that they had no intention of telling you. Hence the black swan. And if there's one, black swans fly in groups. And they will continue to expose more information, and that is the art of the negotiation. His question was, in summary, if I got this correct, sure, you told us about these 3 personalities and the voices. What about the one they're displaying?
The bottom line is, this is where you want to be most of the time. When you're trying to convey your point, you're going to draw your line in the sand, you're going to tell them something that they don't want to hear, then you're going to go to that analyst tone, because I want you to know I'm not playing around right now. This is serious. This is serious business. So there's no real matrix. For the majority of the conversation, be that guy that people want to talk to. No matter what 3 they are. Because again, you're trying to remove yourself as a threat in their brain. So for example, if I'm in the accommodator's tone, I'm clearly being that guy that everybody wants to talk to, and you're being a jerk the entire time.
Let me give you in the world that I'm in now. When we get on the phone with somebody, when they come out, he is peeled to the ceiling, right? He is stuck to the ceiling. He's all amped up. And when we get on the phone with them, he is an ass. Whoever gets on the phone with them, our first negotiator, whoever I put on there as our primary person, that first person that's going to make that contact, you can't meet it that way. And I tell them that first 30 minutes is going to be the hardest because you need to stay in that other role. Most people aren't going to stay pissed off that long. They're not going to be able to do it. Unless you're my ex-wife, you can only stay amped for so long. And typically what happens? They peter off. And when they do, they're going to meet you back at that. And as they give you those opportunities, that's when we're able to use that analyst voice sometimes to hit them on other parts that's important. So we went through the tone. Hopefully we've talked about the importance of tone. Next law of negotiation gravity is that people are 6 times more likely to make a deal with someone they like. How do you know how they're going to like you? How do we get people to like us? It starts with your tone of voice. Your tone of voice is probably the most crucial part of that conversation. I told you before we broke for lunch that they will determine if they're going to like you from that initial time that you start talking. That's why I said it's so important. And it sounds corny, but I literally have people before we're ready. Now think of this. I've got all these assets that are out there. I have them go practice. And I tell them, watch your tone, man, watch your tone. Let's do it again, do it again. So much so they're like, really? Yeah, it's that important. So if they like us, well, how does that work out? Remember, tactical empathy. It's the same as what it is that I'm doing. How am I going to get somebody to come out? I can tell you the vast, vast majority of time of dealing with somebody who's inside that's committed the most horrific crimes. How am I going to get to that place of influence? Trust. And they will. They're going to start to like that person that's on the phone. How? When we talked, when Derek spoke this morning of the different levels of listening, every person in here, we share some things. One of the things that we share is we all want to be heard and understood. If you can demonstrate to somebody through our listening, truly that highest level of listening and paying attention to somebody, and we're going to do it through our labels and our mirrors, and that we're truly paying attention, it's much easier for them to like us. That's how they'll do those deals. But it's hard to stay up here. That's why a lot of times after our negotiations, I send somebody home. They're spent. Because if you're doing it right at this high level, they're exhausted.
They're going to give you more candid information, more reliable information, because they're not, I guess what I'm trying to say is the correction itself makes them feel so good, they're not worried about giving you compromising information. And I'll relay a story to you here in a second as soon as he's done. But take advantage of this desire to correct. And we'll take advantage of it by actually, sometimes we'll intentionally mislabel stuff just to get them to correct us, to tell us it's not that, it's this.
At his level, I'd say yeah, because this becomes old hat. Be careful trying to use the intentional mislabels, because sometimes it can come across, if we don't do it right, like you're not paying attention. But when you do that and you get it wrong and they start to correct you, bring up a seat and listen. You're offering deference. You're letting them, I'm so sorry. Andrew, please, go ahead. And they're giving you more and more information that you didn't have.
Yeah, so he asked, how do you stay in your seat? When they start to correct you, how do you keep your cool? Curiosity. We've been telling you, we're going to beat you over the head with it all day long. Curiosity. Stay curious. First of all, they're giving you data. You're gathering information. Get out of your own feelings. If you can stay out of your own feelings, they're going to give you way more than you expected. And they're going to feel so good about it. It's going to be like eating that red velvet cake, man. You're going to be licking it. They're going to be licking their lips, salivating, wanting to prove to you how much smarter they are than you. But you have to get out of your own head and not look at it as soon as I get a chance, I'm going to punch him back in the face. Derek, myself, all three of us have been telling you time and time again, it's not about you. And almost everything you ask is, how do you get it back about you? You have to learn to not let them get in your head. Figure out the why behind the behavior.
Alan, give it back to them every time they want it. I said it once, I said it twice, the third time now. Deference. You defer, hey, please tell me, educate me. You know what, it seems like I'm not understanding completely what you're saying. Give it back to him. And I just stop there. 2 + 1, the silence. Shut up. If he's going to talk, let him talk. By doing that, remember what you're doing. You're listening at that highest level. You're asking for it all. Well, how's he going to know you're going to give it all back? We laid out all those things in the different texts that we have, in some of the different classes we have. Your labeling, your paraphrasing, your summaries. when you're doing that and you're demonstrating that I'm hearing truly what you're saying, and you're remaining empathetic, not sympathetic, empathetic, you're creating that bond. You're creating that rapport.
Remember, you don't get in life what's fair, you get what you negotiate. If you want to become a better negotiator, click the link in the description below.
All right, cool. Okay, who else? Somebody else had Ryan. Your hand is up.
Yeah, just a couple things, a statement and a question to expand on what Michael was saying. With having multiple people in the organization all doing this training, it's actually kind of an interesting thing when you see somebody else doing it, because it almost makes us get to a point of, oh, it's on. Where are we going with this? I'm curious. Let's see. Obviously you're trying to get somewhere with this. So we actually have had some pretty good in-depth conversations because it's obvious you're trying to get somewhere with this. So let's slow down and let's talk about this. So that's been interesting. I did have a question about something I've observed with a few of our people. I've seen a few accusational audits followed up by a hard statement, and it doesn't seem to have the effect. It seems to have more of an adversarial effect. For example, you're probably going to think I'm nitpicking. You're probably going to think I'm being overbearing. Go move your car.
In that scenario, what would work better is the audits are fine, but instead of saying go move your car, you can say, would you be against going out to the parking lot and moving your car? There's no reason to go hard. Now, Michael's in a cohort right now where he's learning more about using these things assertively, but even we wouldn't do that for even that. So you have to think about what you're trying to accomplish and what you want to make that person feel on the other side, because you have to consider how they're going to receive whatever it is you say. So when I would take that as being kind of sarcastic and maybe a little bit facetious on their part, and doing it in fun, but that can land very wrong. So my suggestion is stop doing that. Whoever's doing that, Michael, whoever's doing that, tell them stop doing that. Instead, throw that no-oriented question out there, because it's going to land a little bit better. Remember, you're supposed to use an audit when you're before a pitcher and ask when you're going to ask something of someone, before bad news, and at the beginning of your conversation. And they're kind of, I don't know what they're doing there, but it's not really using the skills as we're meant to use them. I hope they're doing it in jest. I hope they're having a little bit of fun. If they're not and they're seriously doing it this way, then Ryan, you can go and tell them that Sandy said that is wrong, that they need to follow that with a very good tone and a nice no-oriented question to get them to go move their car.
Yeah, we're working on those. I was just bringing up more as an example of something that I've seen not going quite right. So
yeah, and when you're delivering bad news and telling someone go move your car, because that is bad news. If you're in especially if maybe it's raining and then you think it's even worse to tell somebody to go move their car, but it's about the tone too. So everybody pay attention to this. You use accusations audits, and I know we haven't done them yet. So for those of you that are kind of going, what the heck is happening? Don't worry, we'll get you up to speed. You use that accusations audit before bad news, but it's all about tone. And it's all about getting them ready to receive that bad news. So when you use those audits and you use them correctly and you follow them up with a harsh statement like that, it's like saying but or because. You just ruined everything. So think about that as we move forward. It's very, this is why tactical empathy is the calibrated use of emotional intelligence, because it's very calculated the way we do this to actually prepare someone's mind to hear something negative. And you're not preparing them to hear it in an assertive fashion, because that's not going to work. So just a note to others to keep that in mind when you're using these skills. Ori, did you have something?
Yes, I wanted to try to answer John's problem. I think that labeling, without going further to the most complicated things that we are going to learn, just labeling, I think, according to my experience, my short experience with labeling it's something that you need to acquire. It's not informative, it's transformative. And as much as you use it, you can label the deepest levels of what you feel about the other side of your counterpart. And in the beginning, you may be labeled just doing a surface labeling, which sounds a bit weird. It sounds, maybe the other side can feel it that you are, that you're an expert, that you are just surfacing, that you are just labeling the surface and you don't really feel them. And that's the awkwardness here. It's because you don't really feel them. When you feel them and you will label it, you'll get that's right, even if they don't say it, but you'll be so practiced, you'll be so professional after doing it. It's not doing it, it's all the time you think about it. Even if I'm listening to someone talking next to me and I'm labeling, I'm trying to what would I say in this situation? Or even if I said something in my own situation and it was wrong, or I could do better, I think to myself, I could use this label, I could label better. And then you have, this stack of labels that you have in the back of your mind, and you can just use them in different variations, and you can actually understand what's standing. It's very difficult. I'm very assertive, and I always say my opinion, and people, I'm usual with the people that are listening to my opinion because they are paying a lot of money to listen to my opinion. Okay, so why should I listen to someone else? Okay, but it's very difficult to get out of your box and listen, but deeply listen and really understand the other side, what stands behind the emotion. It's not so trivial. You need to experience it. So that's my 2 cents.
That's a good.
Remember, you don't get in life what's fair, you get what you negotiate. If you want to become a better negotiator, click the link in the description below.
Good point, Ori. And John, I would say if you can come up with a good summary, because summaries, and when you get a that's right out of somebody, that's a bonding moment. It's that oxytocin bonding moment that you get from somebody. So if you can kind of summarize everything that she's going through and then label how she's feeling about it also, that's what a good summary entails. You're looking for a that's right from her. And you can say, am I way off base when you finish the summary, so that she can give you feedback as to whether or not you have everything right the way she feels. And if you get that oxytocin bonding moment, that's gonna do a lot to fix some of the things that you're having issues with. And Michael put something good in the chat. Your family will pick up on labels because they know you. So she's gonna pick up on this change in you because she knows you. And you can kind of take care of that with the right audit. You're going to feel like I'm constantly practicing this stuff on you. And so just say that, because that's how you mitigate the negative, is you point out exactly what you're doing and you diffuse it a little bit. So try both those things, but a summary, and thank you, Ori, because you made my mind kind of, come to that. A summary of what she's going through and how she's feeling right now, looking for that oxytocin bonding moment, is going to be huge for her too.
It looks, it sounds, it feels. Trigger her radar. It looks, it sounds, any sense that begins with it looks, it sounds, it feels, triggers her radar. And to be fair, I think it triggers all of our radars, to be fair. Like when I hear that now.
I hope so, because that's helping you learn.
I'm like,
When you hear that and your brain recognizes that as a label, you're actually paving that neural pathway through the back door, which means your brain is getting used to the stuff. It's almost, and since you know so many languages, you understand this, you can hear and understand before you can speak. So you're hearing and understanding those things before you remember to use them out of your mouth is what's happening. And that's where she may be with this stuff. So label that. Give her positive. You know what it looks like, you're really getting used to using this stuff. You're pretty good at it. And praise her for it, because it'll be a whole different ball game if you make it a positive thing for her instead of her always catching you trying to do it. It's all in how you frame it.
You guys are the best. You guys are the best. This stuff is just crushing. It's devastating stuff, man.
All right. Joe, I see your hand is up next.
I have 2 quick comments. At least I'm going to try to make them quick. John, and I jumped on late, so I wasn't sure if I heard all of what's going on with John. But I'll give you an example of what's happened with me. So my ex-wife, when I started doing this negotiation stuff, we were in the just in the middle of our divorce. So anytime she heard me trying to do something, she immediately thought I was trying to manipulate her in a negative way. I don't know if that's kind of the same scenario of what's going on with your girlfriend, but it sounds like it would be similar. And so my point in this is you may want to consider telling her, hey, look, my best intentions are for your happiness. So that whenever you hear me doing something that is one of these new negotiation tactics that you're learning as well, two black swans working together are going to end up with a better result than one versus that doesn't know it. And so part of my divorce preparation was to ask that question of Brandon. I said, Brandon, what if the lawyer on the other side of the table knows Black Swan? And he goes, then that's a good thing. Why? Because you'll get to a better result for everyone involved, as opposed to my initial thought was, oh, well, they're going to try to manipulate me. So I don't know if that's the dynamic you're going through, but some food for thought. And then as far as the other one around moving the car, Sandy did an excellent job of describing it. There's some words and some comments that she's used in the past that may help to hit home there. Namely, it's the intent and the emotion behind the the statement. It's not so much move the car. And she gave an example of it being sarcastic, but the sarcasm or the bluntness comes across as negative. And so the emotion behind it, the intention behind it isn't move the car. It's still being respectful and what's the word? Not maybe humble is some of the words we've used in the past with the person you're talking to. So it's really around your behind what you're saying. Are you still being respectful of that person that we need to have the car moved? And that makes that tonality that Sandy's talking about. That's what she means by that is the emotional intent behind it. So those are my 2 cents.
Thank you. Based on all the stuff that's being said, when you all are using these skills, your mindset has to be in the right place. You have to be using them for the right reasons. You have to be using them to make sure that you are showing deference to the other side. This is all about emotions and feelings. And remember, this is what we're dealing with. When you're dealing with negative emotions, things get triggered in the brain. When you're dealing with positive emotions, things get triggered in the brain, and your tone affects all of that. If you learned nothing else from that 60 seconds or she dies exercise, you should have learned that. Your tone has an effect on the brain of the other person. And when you raise your voice or when you speak too harshly, it sends them into their amygdala, it scrambles everything around, and they no longer have access to that prefrontal cortex that allows them to think like a normal person. So keep that in mind, no matter what kind of conversation you're in. The more harsh you get, the less smart the other side is going to be. And when they're not smart enough to hear what you're having to say, you're not going to get anything across, and that influence is not going to be there. So, I mean, think about it. If I, as the person running this class, said, "You guys didn't turn in your homework, and what's wrong with you?" and you would scramble and you would say, "Dear God, what's going on with her?" It would totally change the atmosphere of the whole class. So think about every single thing you say and you do has an effect on the people around you. And this is, if you are assertive, I apologize right now because I'm assertive, and I can tell you that keeping that in mind is one of the hardest things I have to do, because I am flippant, I am sarcastic, and usually it's not me being mean, but sometimes it comes across that way because I have that sarcastic tone in my voice, and I have to really watch that. So if you are assertive, that is something you really, really have to work on. Accommodators are naturally more friendly, naturally have a more calming mindset, and naturally more interested in the relationships that are going on with people around them. Then there's the analysts like Barbara, who all about facts and figures and, you know, Joe Friday, just the facts man. And if you give her that, she's happy. Okay. So stability is the key there. But with assertives, sometimes we are all over the place. So if you are assertive, I'm telling you right now, learn how to rein that in. And the best way you can do that is to learn how to use dynamic silence. If you just shut your mouth for a couple seconds and just let the room breathe a little bit. My old partner used to say to me when I first started working sex crimes, he was a guy who'd been doing it for a few years now. He was this big, huge guy who just looked like a big teddy bear. And he was somewhat older than me. And he said, you know what? You just got to put the brakes on and let it get some air under it. In other words, let it breathe. Let the situation breathe. Stop yourself, take a deep breath, let the other side relax, let your mind clear out a little bit. Then you can address what's going on. You have to do that if you're an assertive, because if you don't, you're going to come from a bad place every time and your tone is going to be like the worst thing ever. So think about that. Let every conversation get a little air under it before you continue with it.